Adam Rhodes is a writer and journalist who covers the criminal legal system. His work has appeared in the Chicago Reader, The Appeal, BuzzFeed News, and the Washington Post. Last week, he published an article in Bolts magazine. The headline, "In Illinois, trans people with criminal records still face hurdles to changing their names." I wanted to bring him in after reading it to talk all about it. Lucky for me, lucky for all of us, Adam said yes. Adam, welcome to The Gaily Show.
Hey, how's it going? Really glad to be here.
All right, so updating government issue IDs as one transition is already a fraught situation and process under the best of circumstances.
Yep.
You've taken a deep dive now as it intersects, that process intersects with Illinois' criminal justice system. What did you find out?
Yeah, so basically, as you said, updating identity documents as you transition is always a difficult process. It's always going to come with bureaucratic hurdles, financial hurdles, and all of these hurdles disproportionately impact trans people with criminal histories, particularly Black and brown trans people. In Illinois, state law was amended twice to reform the law. The first amendments took away a felony ban. Like, you had to basically wait until 10 years after your felony conviction and any sentence was lapsed to be able to change your name. And then there was a publication requirement, which not only trans people, but, domestic violence survivors have long said disproportionately impacts them, opens them up to violence, harassment, things like that. And even after those reforms, I found that there are still barriers for trans people with criminal histories, particularly in Cook County, where prosecutors have taken a lot of attention to trans people, or just people in general with criminal histories, changing their names.
Can you tell us, there was one person that you talked to whose story was harrowing, where they survived an attack they were being assaulted for being trans. That's their identity. They fought back. They were convicted of. Can you tell us that story of that individual?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is Aisha Love, a really fantastic person and really staunch advocate for this. I've kind of been in communication with her about this topic for years. And just like you said, she was defending herself in an anti-trans attack. She has long said that the man who she was in an altercation with was verbally and physically harassing her because she was trans. And as she was fleeing, as part of her fleeing, she hit him with her car and then was actually sentenced and convicted for aggravated battery. Was then incarcerated in a men's prison for a number of years, frequently in solitary confinement. And even after all of that, had to wait almost a decade to change her name, finally changed her name in 2024. So really at every possible level illustrates the way that the criminal legal system particularly impacts trans people, Black and brown trans people, trans people with criminal convictions. And, at every stage, again, adding insult and insult and insult to the injuries that she's already faced.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then to make someone, even under the Biden or Obama administrations, to say, you now have to publish your name in a newspaper and just highlight to everybody, right? Like, there's no privacy about that. So Illinois gets rid of the 10-year requirement, but prosecutors can still file motions to prevent people who are applying. Do I have that right?
Yes, correct. So prosecutors, it is written into the law that prosecutors, the state's attorney's office, has the ability to object in name change petitions. It basically gives the state the ability to tell the court, like, hey, we believe this person because of X and X criminal history, or because of X and X that they have voluntarily disclosed in these name change petitions. Because of what they have disclosed, we do not think they should change the name. It is also frequently the case where they'll say, prosecutors will say, like, we either want the court to deny this petition or require them to begin the process of updating their criminal history transcript, which comes with a lot of, onerous requirements in and of itself, going down oftentimes to a police station or CPD headquarters to get fingerprinted. For people with criminal histories, that is obviously a really fraught and emotional and, traumatizing process. So it really adds a lot of bureaucratic hurdles to a process that is already really, really burdensome.
Mm-hmm. What are the I don't know. What are the why are the courts and the criminal justice system saying that we still need to have all of these things? Because it creates a situation in my mind where if you have someone who's gone through their gender affirmation, they have transitioned, they're not part of their phase of life, and their presentation does not match what their ID looks like. That's creating situations that can lead to dangerous outcomes for people. So what are the folks that are opposed to these changes? What is their rationale for this?
Yeah, so really just want to underscore that like these policies are quite literally putting trans people at risk. Like think of every time that you use a name or like show up to an appointment and they like check in and it's like, oh, can I just check you in? Stuff like that. Every time that happens, if that ID, the name on your ID does not match the like name that you have given that person, it opens them up to anti-trans violence. And there are rising reports of anti-trans violence. There have been for years. But the people who are in favor of these restrictions are basically saying it's a public safety issue, that they want to prevent people from, you know, changing their name and then committing all of these crimes, like without all of that information tracking them. Number one, we know that's not true because, again, as criminal history transcripts are updated, like that name, like both somebody's former name and their new name follow them. You know, in the year of our Lord 2025, like people, it is almost impossible for people to disappear. You know, social security numbers follow people for their lives. Digital footprints are impossible to erase these days. You know, these laws were frequently passed in, or, you know, go back to a time where like people could just like dodge creditors or dodge arrest by like changing their name. And that's why the publication requirement was a thing. But that does not exist now. Universally, the people that I've spoken to say that like those arguments do not hold water.
Well, and I'm just the article flagged for me, particularly because I'm literally going through a name change process. So I was literally in front of a judge last week, giving my case for this. This is just my surname, and I just want to underscore like these things stay with you. There is literally like on all of my documentation, like my records and everything, it very clearly is like previous name that's gone on her passport, social security, like all of this. I'm just saying that from my cisgender lived experience of having to change my last name, it continues to go with you throughout your life. It is impossible for me to get around it. You also were telling in your article about Commissioner Maggie Trevor,
Yes,
from Cook County, I believe,
yep.
and the work that Commissioner Trevor is doing. Can you update us on that part of
Yeah,
the story?
so basically, at a mid-year budget hearing, this is kind of where I kind of came to this story. At a mid-year budget hearing, Commissioner Trevor, you know, asked the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, like, "Hey, I've received reports about this. LGBTQ plus elected officials have talked to your office a lot about this. Like, what is going on here?" And it basically kind of was that the Cook County State's Attorney's Office at the time did not have any written policy in place. They had a practice that they were continuing from the previous State's Attorney Kim Fox's office. And again, they were just kind of continuing that practice. And as a result of, you know, the questioning at the mid-year budget hearing, meetings with other advocates, with other interested organizations, a new policy was crafted. It is a very short policy that does not contain any explicit provisions about how gender identity and like those very legitimate safety concerns are weighed against like these nebulous public safety concerns that, you know, people who are in favor of the criminal legal system tend to kind of float in these circumstances. But as it stands right now, there is a policy. But again, you know, advocates have said that that policy is weird. You know, it's written both really, really vague and unclear in a way that like gives prosecutors a lot of leeway to kind of like pick and choose.
We are talking with writer and journalist Adam Rhodes about his recent article in Bolts magazine, headline: "In Illinois, trans people with criminal records still face hurdles to changing their names." So what is next for this story? I know there are still there's a lot of advocacy that's still going on. There are a lot of elected officials that are still raising the issue and saying we need to change policies and laws. But everything's still kind of, is it still murky? Is there a path forward for change in Illinois?
It's still pretty murky. From my knowledge, there isn't any, you know, like legislation actively trying to amend the law again. But the people that I've spoken with, you know, Avi Rudnick at the Transformative Justice Law Project in particular, have said like it is frankly at a point where an additional change to state law will probably be required, given the amount of meetings people have had with Cook County State's Attorney's Office and all of that, that it is at a point where, it just needs a further amendment of state law to provide the guardrails and add a little more specificity to, what prosecutors are allowed to object with, what are people's individual rights under the law, and how, the spirit of these reforms, which were to create increased avenues for trans people to be able to change their name, to live safely and authentically in Illinois, for that to, be reality.
Are there organizations, specific organizations that folks who are, for trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, that they can connect with to help guide them through this?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the Transformative Justice Law Project. They do a lot of mobilizations related to name change petitions, as well as Chicago House and their trans legal program.
Wow. It's just such an, interesting is the wrong word
I got you.
to use here in this, because I really recommend folks to read Adam's work here, because it is so well researched and thoughtfully done, and we're just very lucky that you took the time to dive into this, because also you were referencing a number of studies from GLAAD and from I'm trying to see here, there's a 2015 survey here. I mean, what was the research like for this? Because I imagine it just must have been so much.
Yeah, so positively or otherwise, I have covered LGBTQ people in the criminal legal system for years, so it is something that I personally have a really deep knowledge of. I'm very well sourced in this, and these are issues, again, I've covered for years. For Extra Magazine, I think earlier last year or this year, time is confusing these days, but have reported on, rising anti-LGBTQ hate crimes, rising anti-trans hate crimes. And so, this article kind of pulled a lot of that in, that, I think for people who might not have a close understanding of this issue, they just see like a name change as like, oh, it's just like your name, like what's the big deal? But again, as we've talked about, like this opens up trans people to tremendous violence, and that avenue for violence is coming at a time where anti-trans violence is at an all-time high, or is rising. I can't really speak to if it's an all-time high or not. Amid additionally the federal government trying to restrict people's ability to get passports and other identity documents that affirm their identities as well. So in some ways the research wasn't as like super exhausting, because I had kind of done the research already throughout my other reporting. But again, it is kind of like tying all of these pieces together that might not like super narrowly fit, but kind of like sociologically, I would say, really kind of are together in this piece.
Are there states that are doing this correctly?
There are states that are certainly doing it better. I think a lot of advocates that I talked to said, there are still barriers across the country to changing their name, whether it is simply administrative, whether it is like financial. A name change petition in some states can cost a couple $100s. There are pro bono legal services or low-cost legal services, particularly for trans people who want to change their names. But really just want to highlight, like, New York lets incarcerated people change their name. And that was kind of pinpointed as like, look at what other states are doing. That, like, these nebulous concerns about public safety are, those conversations are different in other states where, again, people who maybe in Illinois, people would say like shouldn't be able to change their name. In New York, they're able to change their name.
The article is in Illinois, trans people with criminal records still face hurdles to changing their name. The author is writer and journalist Adam Rhodes. You can read it for yourself at boltsmag.org. Real quick, like in 10 seconds, Adam, how do folks connect with you?
I am no longer terminally online. If anything has taught me these days, it is that the internet is a dark and scary place. You can find me on Blue Sky, and my website, it is adamrhodeswrites.com.
Perfect.
But that's
I gotta leave it there. We'll put links in our show notes and on our website. More after the break.